Higher-ups feel your methods don't align with company protocol. You're giving new hires unrealistic expectations. Dean leaned against the break room counter, arms crossed over his chest. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Between us, they think you make the rest of management look bad when your trainees praise your approach. I stood there, coffee growing cold in my hand, as 3 years of dedication evaporated in 30 seconds. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, suddenly too bright. I don't understand, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the hollow feeling spreading through my chest. My trainees consistently exceed targets weeks ahead of schedule. Customer satisfaction scores have never been higher. Dean shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. Numbers aren't everything, Iris. Who's taking over? The question felt like gravel in my throat. Preston starts Monday, regional manager's nephew. Dean checked his watch. He has a business degree from somewhere prestigious. Has he ever worked the phones? Dean's silence was answer enough. I nodded, carefully placing my untouched coffee on the counter. Is that all? You'll need to turn over your training materials by end of day. Dean pushed himself off the counter. And Iris? Don't make this difficult. The decision came from above. I spent the weekend boxing up my personal items from the training room. 3 years of carefully crafted guides, situation cards, and troubleshooting flowcharts, all developed after hours on my own time. I'd made the mistake of never formally copywriting them as my own intellectual property. Monday morning arrived with Preston strutting through the door in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He was younger than I expected, maybe 25, with carefully styled hair and a smile that seemed permanently fixed to his face. You must be Iris. He extended his hand. I've heard so much about you. I'm looking forward to taking training to the next level. Behind him, 5 new hires waited nervously, their eyes darting between us. The training room is through there, I said, ignoring his outstretched hand. Materials are on the desk. His smile faltered for just a moment. Actually, I brought my own curriculum, very cutting-edge stuff from my graduate studies. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Oh, and Dean mentioned you should stick to your regular duties from now on. No dropping by training sessions. Might confuse the new folks. I looked back at the new hires, seeing the uncertainty in their eyes. They had no idea what they were in for. Good luck, I said, and meant it. Before I continue with what happened next, if you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, what happens over the next few weeks in that call center is something you won't want to miss. Drop a comment letting me know if you've ever had your hard work dismissed like this. My name is Iris Meadows, and until that morning, I'd been the top trainer at Midwest Customer Solutions for 3 years running. I wasn't supposed to be good at this job. It was just something to pay bills after college while I figured out my next move. But somehow, the temporary job became permanent, and I discovered I had a knack for training people. What made my approach different? I was honest. I showed new hires the unfiltered reality of handling angry customers, navigating outdated systems, and managing impossible metrics. But I also gave them the tools to succeed, shortcuts through the clunky software, phrases that diffuse tension, and workarounds for common problems. Management never knew about half my methods. They didn't need to, they just saw the results. My trainees rarely quit, unlike the revolving door in other departments. Customers asked for them by name. Satisfaction scores climbed month after month. I'd trained over 200 new hires in my time. Some moved on to better opportunities, but most stayed, creating a loyal base of employees who respected me. I'd never wanted a management position. I preferred working directly with people, rather than drowning in reports and meetings. By Wednesday of Preston's first week, whispers reached me. The new training consisted entirely of slide presentations about company history and generic customer service platitudes. When trainees asked practical questions, Preston directed them to the outdated manual or told them they'd learn on the job. Ling, one of the new hires, caught me in the break room. Her eyes were red from crying. I don't understand anything he's teaching us, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. We haven't even practiced using the system yet, and we're supposed to take calls tomorrow. I wanted to help her, but I'd seen Dean watching me closely all week. You'll figure it out, I said, hating myself for the words. Everyone does, eventually. But Tasha said you used to have special guides that made everything simple. Tasha was one of my former trainees, now a team lead. Things change, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Ling's desperate expression. By morning, I'd made my decision. I arrived an hour early and slipped a flash drive onto Ling's desk with digital copies of my old training materials. Nothing proprietary, just the guides I'd created myself. "Don't tell anyone where you got this," I whispered when she arrived, "and share it only with people you trust." Her grateful smile was worth the risk. By the end of week 1, the new hires were on the phones, and the disaster began. Call times stretched to triple the target. Customers demanded supervisors. Hold times ballooned. The ever-present board displaying real-time metrics flashed red all day. Preston blamed the new hires. "This group just doesn't have what it takes," he told Dean loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe we should reconsider our hiring standards." I bit my tongue and focused on my own calls, setting personal records for efficiency while chaos swirled around me. Several of my former trainees did the same, creating islands of competence in a sea of confusion. Week 2 brought the first performance reviews. Not a single new hire had met their targets. Dean paced the floor, stress evident as complaint emails piled up from frustrated customers. The new hires looked shell-shocked, jumping at the sound of incoming calls. I was getting coffee when Preston cornered me in the break room. "I know what you're doing," he said, voice low. "Making coffee?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're sabotaging my training program, setting me up to fail." I stirred my coffee slowly. "I haven't done anything. The new hires keep mentioning your methods. Someone's sharing information. Sounds like people talking about what works. That's not a crime." His face flushed. "I've spoken with Dean. From now on, you're banned from all training sessions and discussions. You're not to speak to any new hire about procedures or methods. You're making management look bad. By doing my job well? By undermining authority," he snapped. "This isn't just about you anymore. The regional director is visiting next month, and these numbers need to improve. Stay in your lane, Iris." As he stormed out, Tasha slipped in. "Trouble with the golden boy?" "Nothing I can't handle." I sipped my coffee. "How's your team doing?" "Drowning. The new system update makes everything worse. And these new hires don't know the basics." She lowered her voice. "Some of us are teaching them after hours, but there's only so much we can do." "Be careful," I warned. "Apparently I'm contagious." Tasha snorted. "Too late for warnings. Half the floor already thinks you were done dirty. Just keep your head down. This will sort itself out." "Will it?" She gave me a searching look. "You've been here longer than I have. When has anything sorted itself out without someone forcing the issue?" She was right. Problems didn't solve themselves. But direct confrontation wasn't my style. I'd learned long ago that the loudest voice rarely won in the end. By the end of week 2, the metrics were worse. Customer complaints had doubled. Call abandonment rates were at an all-time high. Dean started taking long meetings that everyone knew were just him hiding in his office. On Monday of week 3, Ling didn't come in. Her desk sat empty, her resignation email brief and to the point. "This position is not as described during the interview process. I have accepted employment elsewhere." Preston acted as if nothing had happened. The remaining 4 new hires looked increasingly desperate. One, Marco, asked me for help when Preston stepped out. "I don't understand the billing system at all," he admitted. "Every time I try to process a refund, I get locked out." I glanced around to make sure no one was watching. "There's a workaround," I whispered, leaning over as if checking his screen for another reason. "When it asks for the authorization code, enter the date backward, followed by the first 3 digits of the customer ID." His eyes widened. "That's not in any of the training materials." "Because it's not official, but it works." As I showed him the steps, Preston returned. His face darkened when he saw us. "Marco, I believe you have calls waiting," he said sharply. "Iris, a word?" Marco scrambled back to his station while Preston pulled me aside. "I thought I made myself clear," he hissed. "You are not to interfere with my trainees." He asked a simple question about the system. Then he should have asked me. Preston straightened his tie. "This is your final warning. Next time, I go straight to Dean." I nodded, the familiar heat of anger rising in my chest. "Understood." As I walked away, I heard Marco's voice behind me, speaking to a customer. "Yes, ma'am. I can process that refund right away." For the first time that day, he sounded confident. Small victories, I told myself. Sometimes that's all we get. By the end of week 3, the situation had deteriorated further. 2 more resignation letters appeared on Dean's desk. The remaining new hires looked like they'd aged years and days, dark circles under their eyes, jumping at every sharp noise. Preston maintained his slideshow training sessions while the department fell apart around him. Somehow, he always had an excuse ready. The quality of recruits, system issues, unreasonable customers. never his inadequate training methods. Thursday afternoon, I overheard Dean on the phone with someone from the regional office. His voice carried through his partially open door as I passed by. "I understand the numbers are concerning," he said, pacing behind his desk. "But we're implementing new strategies as we speak. Yes, I'm aware of the resignation rate. No, I don't think returning to the previous training method is necessary." There was a long pause. "With all due respect, sir, that trainer had unorthodox methods that didn't align with company policy. Yes, I'm aware her results were good, but yes, sir, I understand. The regional director's visit is still scheduled for the 15th. We'll have things turned around by then." He hung up and dropped heavily into his chair, not noticing me outside his door. I continued walking, mind racing. The regional director was still coming, and clearly, the higher-ups had noticed the sudden drop in performance. Week 4 brought a tense Monday morning meeting. Dean stood at the front of the room, dark patches of sweat visible under his arms, despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Our Q3 numbers are the worst in company history," he announced, voice strained. "Customer satisfaction is down 42%. Call resolution times have nearly doubled. We've lost 5 new hires in 3 weeks." Preston sat in the corner, typing furiously on his laptop as if documenting every word. "The regional director will be here next Friday," Dean continued. "She'll want explanations, solutions, results." His eyes scanned the room, avoiding mine. "I need everyone at their best. No exceptions, no excuses." After the meeting, Tasha caught up with me at my desk. "This is insane," she muttered. "Everyone knows what the problem is, but no one will say it. That's office politics for you. It's more than that." She lowered her voice. "Word is, Preston's uncle is grooming him for a regional position. This training gig is just a stepping stone. Whether he succeeds or fails doesn't matter. He's moving up regardless." The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. So we all suffer while he builds his resume? "Welcome to corporate America." Tasha squeezed my shoulder. "Some of us are updating our resumes. You might want to do the same." I nodded absently, but inside, something hardened. I'd spent 3 years building something valuable here. I wasn't ready to walk away just because someone with connections had decided I made management look bad. That afternoon, I noticed Marco helping another new hire, Zoe, with a difficult customer. He was showing her my refund trick. Preston saw it too, marching over immediately. "That's not the approved procedure," he said loudly. "Where did you learn that?" Marco froze. "I figured it out myself." "No, you didn't. That's one of Iris's unauthorized shortcuts." All heads turned toward me. I kept my eyes on my screen, heat crawling up my neck. "It works," Marco said quietly. "The official way takes twice as long." "That's not the point," Preston's voice rose. "We follow approved procedures here, not shortcuts." But the customer was getting angry. "That's enough," Preston cut him off. "Both of you, in the training room, now." I watched as they followed Preston. Zoe's shoulders slumped in defeat. An hour later, Marco emerged alone, face grim as he gathered his things. "What happened?" I whispered as he passed my desk. "I quit," he said simply. "Life's too short." By the end of day, Zoe had submitted her resignation too. 6 down, 6 to go. That night, I stayed late, waiting until the office emptied. When everyone had gone, I logged into the system and pulled reports, call statistics, customer satisfaction scores, employee retention rates. I created graphs comparing the 3 months before Preston's arrival to the month after. The contrast was stark, undeniable. I printed a single copy, slid it into a folder labeled "Suggestion for Improvement," and dropped it into the company suggestion box. No name, no fingerprints, just data telling its own story. The next morning, Dean looked like he hadn't slept. His hands shook slightly as he poured his coffee. "Iris," he called as I passed the break room. "A word?" I stepped inside, keeping my expression neutral. "How are things going on the floor?" he asked, stirring his coffee absently. "About as well as the metrics suggest," I replied carefully. He winced. "Look, I know things have been challenging since the training transition. That's one way to put it. The thing is," he lowered his voice, "Preston's uncle and the regional director have history, bad history. She's looking for any excuse to push back against his influence." Understanding dawned, and Preston's failure would give her that excuse. Dean nodded slightly. "I'm caught in the middle here. If I undermine Preston, his uncle makes my life hell. If I support him while the department crashes, the director might clean house entirely. Sounds like you made your choice 3 weeks ago." I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I did what I thought was best at the time. He looked genuinely distressed. But now, I need your help. The director arrives in 8 days. Is there any way you could, I don't know, share some of your methods with Preston, just to get us through the inspection? The audacity of the request left me speechless for a moment. After forcing me out, after banning me from training, after watching half the new hires quit, now he wanted my help? Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to teach Preston how to do the job you took from me, so he can impress the director and take credit for my methods? Dean had the grace to look ashamed. When you put it that way, that is the only way to put it. I stepped toward the door. You made this bed, Dean. Now you get to lie in it. As I walked away, another resignation appeared in Dean's inbox, the 7th in a month. The next few days brought a strange, tense calm to the office. Preston continued his training sessions with the remaining 5 new hires, but there was a desperate edge to his voice, audible even through closed doors. Dean barely left his office, emerging only for essential meetings, his face growing more haggard by the day. Thursday afternoon, I received an unexpected email from the regional director herself. Miss Meadows, I've reviewed the anonymous suggestions submitted to your branch last week. The data presented is concerning, to say the least. I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with you privately during my visit tomorrow. Please clear your calendar for 2 p.m. Regards, Eleanor Vance, Regional Director. My heart raced as I read it. How had she connected the suggestion to me? I'd been careful not to include any identifying information. As if sensing my thoughts, Tasha appeared at my desk. The director's assistant called me yesterday, she said quietly. Asked a lot of questions about the training changes and how they've affected the floor. I hope you don't mind, but I might have mentioned your name several times. I shook my head, unable to suppress a small smile. Throwing me under the bus? More like throwing you a rope. She grinned. A bunch of us got calls. Seems the director is doing her homework before tomorrow. That evening, as I was leaving, Preston stepped into the elevator with me. We rode in silence until he spoke, his voice unusually subdued. I know you submitted that report to the suggestion box. I kept my eyes on the floor numbers. I don't know what you're talking about. The metrics comparison, the retention rates. It could only have been you. The elevator stopped at the parking level. As I stepped out, he caught my arm. I could lose everything tomorrow, he said, a note of desperation in his voice. My uncle stuck his neck out to get me this position. Maybe you should have thought about that before tearing apart a working system. I had to make my mark, prove I could do things differently. For the first time, he looked genuinely distressed. Help me, Iris. Tell me what to do. I studied his face, searching for sincerity and finding only fear. There's nothing I can do for you now, Preston. The numbers speak for themselves. As I walked to my car, I heard him call after me. I'll remember this, Iris. This isn't over. His words followed me home, echoing in my mind as I prepared for the next day. The director's visit. The reckoning that had been building for a month. That night, I barely slept, running through scenarios in my head. What would I say to Eleanor Vance? How honest could I be without seeming vindictive? What did I actually want to happen? By morning, I still didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing. After weeks of silence, it was finally time to speak. When I arrived at the office, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Dean stood by the entrance in his best suit, checking his watch every few minutes. Preston was nowhere to be seen. At precisely 10 a.m., Eleanor Vance strode through the front doors. She was shorter than I expected, perhaps in her early 50s, with steel gray hair cut in a practical bob and sharp eyes that missed nothing. 2 assistants trailed behind her, tablets in hand. Mr. Wilson, she greeted Dean with a firm handshake. I trust you're prepared for our review? Dean's smile looked painful. Of course, Director Vance. We've prepared a presentation in the conference room. I'm not interested in presentations, she said crisply. I want to see your operation as it is. No rehearsals, no staging. As she swept past him onto the call center floor, Dean shot me a panicked look. I turned back to my computer, heart pounding in my chest. The morning unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Eleanor observed calls, questioned processes, and examined metrics in real time. Preston finally appeared, sweating through his expensive shirt as he attempted to explain the training program. The remaining new hires stumbled through their calls, clearly intimidated by the director's presence. At 1:45, I received a message to meet Eleanor in the small conference room. As I made my way there, I passed Dean's office. Through the glass, I could see him, sitting with his head in his hands. Eleanor Vance sat alone in the conference room, a stack of papers spread before her. She didn't look up when I entered, just gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, Miss Meadows." I sat, hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. "I've spent the morning observing your department," she said, still reviewing documents. "Frankly, it's worse than the numbers suggested." "It wasn't always like this," I said quietly. Now she looked up, her gaze analytical. "No, it wasn't. According to these reports, this department was the top-performing customer service center in the region for 2 years running." She tapped a graph showing a steep decline. "Until approximately 1 month ago." She slid a folder toward me. Inside was the report I'd submitted to the suggestion box. "Did you create this?" There was no point denying it. "Yes." "Why anonymously?" "I was told not to interfere with the new training program." "By whom?" "Dean Wilson and Preston Hayes." She made a note. "Tell me about your training program, Iris, the one that was replaced." For the next 20 minutes, I explained my approach. The practical hands-on training, the troubleshooting guides, the authentic preparation for difficult customers. She listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. "And all this was developed on company time?" she asked. "Some during, most after hours," I admitted. "I saw problems that needed solutions. Yet you never sought promotion to management?" "I preferred working directly with people, making an immediate difference." She studied me for a long moment. "Do you know why I requested this meeting?" I assumed it was about the report, partially. She closed her folder. 3 weeks ago, I started receiving emails from former employees of this center. All recent resignations, all citing the same issues: inadequate training, unreasonable expectations, lack of support. One mentioned you specifically, saying the company had sidelined their best asset. My throat tightened. "I didn't ask anyone to contact you." "I know. That's what makes it significant." Eleanor leaned forward. "When employees who've quit go out of their way to defend someone still employed, I pay attention." She pulled another document from her stack. "Yesterday, I received this." It was an email with dozens of names attached. Current and former employees, all vouching for my training methods, all describing the decline since Preston took over. "I didn't know about this," I whispered, genuinely surprised. "Your colleagues organized it themselves. Rather impressive solidarity in an industry not known for it." She paused. "What would you do, Iris, if you were in my position right now?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm not sure I understand." "If you saw a department in freefall with clear evidence pointing to the cause, what action would you take?" I considered my answer carefully. I'd remove the cause and restore what worked. "Simple as that?" "Simple doesn't mean easy," I acknowledged. "There would be complications, such as Preston's uncle, Regional VP Hayes." Eleanor's mouth curved slightly. "Yes, I'm aware of that particular complication." She gathered her papers, straightening them with precise movements. "One last question. If you had the opportunity to rebuild what was dismantled, would you take it, even knowing certain people would resist?" My heart raced. "Yes," without hesitation. "Good." She stood. "Wait here, please." Eleanor left me alone in the conference room for nearly 30 minutes. Through the glass walls, I watched her move across the floor, speaking with various employees, inspecting workstations. Eventually, she entered Dean's office, closing the door behind her. 10 minutes passed. 15. The glass walls of Dean's office prevented me from hearing anything, but the body language told its own story. Eleanor speaking firmly, Dean's shoulders progressively slumping, occasional glances toward the training room where Preston was working with the remaining new hires. Finally, Eleanor emerged, Dean following like a scolded child. They headed straight for the training room. Another closed-door conversation I couldn't hear. When Preston emerged, his face was flushed deep red. He stormed to his desk, yanked open drawers, and began throwing personal items into his messenger bag. Dean stood in the training room doorway, looking shell-shocked as Preston brushed past him and headed for the exit. As he passed the conference room, Preston caught sight of me waiting inside. He stopped abruptly, veering toward the door. I tensed as he pushed it open. "Happy now?" he spat, knuckles white on his bag strap. "You've ruined everything." I maintained eye contact. "You did that yourself." "This isn't over," he hissed. "My uncle will hear about this, and he doesn't forget when people cross his family." Before I could respond, Eleanor's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Hayes." She stood in the hallway, her expression glacial. "Your exit interview is scheduled for 4:30. HR is expecting you. I suggest you don't miss it." Preston's jaw worked silently. With one last venomous glance at me, he turned and stalked toward the exit, shoulders rigid with fury. Eleanor watched him go before turning to me. Are you all right? Fine, I said, though my heart was still racing. What happens now? Now we rebuild. She gestured for me to follow her. Come with me. She led me to the large conference room where most of the staff had gathered. Uncertainty hung in the air as Eleanor took position at the front. Dean stood to one side, looking both relieved and apprehensive. I've completed my initial assessment, Eleanor announced. The situation is as serious as the numbers indicated, but not irreparable. Effective immediately. I'm implementing several changes. She outlined a restructuring plan, new performance metrics, revised scheduling, and most significantly, an overhaul of the training program. To lead this overhaul, she continued, I'm creating a new position, Director of Training and Development. She paused, eyes finding mine in the crowd. Iris Meadows will assume this role, with full authority to implement her methods across all regional centers. A murmur swept through the room. Tasha caught my eye from across the table, giving me a subtle thumbs up. Additionally, Eleanor continued, Dean Wilson will be transitioning to a new role as floor supervisor, reporting directly to Iris. Dean's face went slack with shock. I felt a similar disbelief washing over me. These changes take effect immediately, Eleanor concluded. Details will follow by email this afternoon. That's all for now. As people filed out, buzzing with the news, Eleanor motioned for me to stay behind. When we were alone, she spoke candidly. I need to be transparent with you, Iris. This promotion will make you enemies. Preston's uncle, I guessed. Among others, there's a faction in upper management that preferred Preston's approach. Less empowerment, more rigid adherence to scripts. It's cheaper, easier to control, but less effective, I pointed out. Significantly, she nodded, which is why I can justify this change based on metrics alone. But make no mistake, they'll be watching for any slip-up, any excuse to say I made the wrong call. I understand the risk, I said. I'm willing to take it. Good. She handed me a folder. Your new contract. Review it tonight. We'll finalize tomorrow. For now, you might want to speak with your team. They'll have questions. As I left the conference room, Dean was waiting in the hallway. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. Congratulations, he said stiffly. Thank you. I kept my tone professional. We should talk about the transition. Yes, he swallowed hard. Iris, I want you to know. Not here, I interrupted quietly. My office tomorrow morning. He nodded, relief flickering across his face. Tomorrow then. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. News of the restructuring spread quickly. 3 of the recently resigned employees called asking if they could return. The remaining new hires approached me cautiously, asking when real training would begin. By 6 o'clock, the office had emptied except for me and Tasha, who perched on the edge of my desk as I packed up. Director of Training, she mused. Pretty impressive for someone who needed to stay in her lane. It hasn't fully sunk in yet, I admitted. Well, while you're waiting for reality to catch up, some of us are celebrating at Riverside Grill. You should come. I don't know, Tasha. It's been a long day. All the more reason. She bumped my shoulder with hers. Besides, everyone wants to toast the new boss. I raised an eyebrow. Everyone? Well, maybe not Dean. She grinned. Though I'd pay good money to see his face when you give him his first assignment. I thought about Dean, about Preston, about the month of watching everything I'd built crumble. The victory felt sweet, but incomplete. Something still nagged at me. You coming or not? Tasha prompted. I'll meet you there, I promised. There's something I need to finish first. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet office. My new office would be ready Monday, the one previously occupied by the department director who'd retired last year. The position had remained vacant, with Dean handling the duties unofficially while hoping for a promotion that now would never come. I opened my laptop and began typing, a detailed outline for the new training program, expanding on my previous methods but incorporating new elements. As I worked, a plan began forming in my mind, not just for training, but for ensuring what happened with Preston could never happen again. By the time I finished, it was past 9. The celebration at Riverside would be winding down. Instead of joining them, I drove home, the outline safely emailed to my personal account as backup. As I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your promotion. Enjoy it while it lasts. Preston's parting shot. I should have been worried, but instead, I felt a strange calm. He still thought this was about him, about personal grievances and office politics. He had no idea what was coming. The weekend gave me time to prepare. I spent Saturday organizing my notes and creating a structured timeline for the training overhaul. Sunday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Eleanor. "I hope I'm not interrupting your weekend," she began. "But something's come to my attention that you should be aware of." "What is it?" I asked, setting aside my laptop. "Preston's uncle is pushing for a full audit of your department. He's claiming the performance issues stem from fundamental problems that preceded Preston's arrival." "That's absurd," I said. "The numbers clearly show." "I know," she cut in, "but he has enough influence to make this happen. The audit begins next Monday." My mind raced. "What does this mean for the restructuring?" "It proceeds as planned," Eleanor assured me. "But be prepared for intense scrutiny. Document everything. This is their attempt to undermine you before you've even started." "I understand," I said, already mentally revising my plans. "Thank you for the warning." "One more thing," she added. "Preston has accepted a position at the Eastern Regional Office. Different department, but you should know he'll still be within the company." After we hung up, I sat motionless, absorbing this new information. An audit. Preston's still in the company. His uncle gunning for me. The game had changed, but so had the stakes. My initial satisfaction at regaining control of the training program now seemed naive. This wasn't just about restoring what worked, it was about defending it against people with the power and motivation to tear it down again. Monday morning arrived with a sense of expectation humming through the office. My new office had been prepared over the weekend, larger than my previous workspace, with glass walls offering a view of the entire floor. Someone had placed a small plant on the desk with a card signed by several team members. At 9 sharp, Dean knocked on my open door, looking uncomfortable and business casual rather than his usual suit. The demotion had already altered how he presented himself. "Come in," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Close the door, please." He sat stiffly, hands resting on his knees. "I've prepared a transition report," he said, placing a folder on my desk. "All current projects, schedules, and personnel notes." "Thank you." I set it aside without opening it. "Dean, we need to discuss what happened last month." He shifted in his seat. "I know I owe you an explanation." "You owe me more than that," I said quietly. "But right now, I need honesty more than apologies." For the next hour, Dean laid out the full story, how Preston's uncle had pressured the previous regional director to place his nephew in a position to prove himself, how Dean had been promised support for his own promotion if he facilitated Preston's success, how the decision to remove me from training had come directly from above, with threats rather than suggestions. "I should have stood up for you," he finished, unable to meet my eyes. "I was a coward." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You were." He flinched but didn't argue. "The question is," I continued, "what are you now? Because an audit team arrives next Monday, and I need to know if you're with me or against me." His head snapped up. "An audit? Already?" I nodded. "Preston's uncle is moving quickly." Dean ran a hand through his thinning hair. "They'll tear everything apart, looking for any mistake, any weakness." "I'm aware. That's why I need to know where you stand." He was quiet for a long moment. "I've worked here 12 years, he finally said. "This company has been my whole career. If I help you against Preston's uncle and we lose." "We won't lose," I said with more confidence than I felt. "But only if everyone is aligned." Dean studied my face, perhaps seeing something there that helped him decide. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you know about Preston's uncle. Every email, every conversation, every directive that came down regarding the training program. I need a paper trail." "Some of it was verbal only," he warned. "Then write it down, with dates and times, to the best of your recollection." He nodded slowly. "I can do that. What else?" "I need you to run interference with the floor supervisors. Some of them are still loyal to the old way. I need them on board or out of the way." "That won't be easy," he cautioned. "Jason and Kim were both pushing for Preston's approach." "Then they can join him at the Eastern office," I said flatly. "I don't have time for resistance." Dean looked at me with new respect, or perhaps apprehension. "You've changed, Iris." "No," I corrected him. "I'm exactly who I always was. You're just seeing it clearly for the first time." After Dean left, I spent the morning meeting with my new team, 5 senior representatives who would help implement the training overhaul. They were eager, motivated by the prospect of fixing what had broken. Lunch brought another surprise, an email from Preston's uncle himself, Regional VP Hayes. "Miss Meadows, I understand congratulations are in order on your promotion. Director Vance speaks highly of your capabilities. I look forward to reviewing your department's progress during next week's audit. In preparation, Please provide comprehensive documentation of all training materials, methodologies, and metrics from the past calendar year. Our audit team will require complete access to all systems and personnel. Best regards, Richard Hayes, Regional Vice President. The message was professional, even cordial on the surface, but the subtext was clear. Prepare to be dissected. I forwarded the email to Eleanor with a simple question. Standard procedure? Her response came minutes later. No, this is targeted. Proceed carefully. By mid-afternoon, word of the audit had spread through the department. Tasha appeared in my doorway, concern evident on her face. Is it true? Hayes is sending in his people? Next Monday, I confirmed. That's not enough time to fix everything Preston broke. No, I agreed. It's not. She closed the door and lowered her voice. Some of us were talking. If they're coming to find problems, we could give them the opposite. Make everything look perfect for the week they're here. You mean fake the numbers? I shook my head. That would only make things worse when discovered. Not fake, she clarified. Just everyone working at their absolute best. No breaks, no complaints, everyone helping the new hires. We can maintain it for a week. I considered her suggestion. It wasn't dishonest, exactly, but it wasn't sustainable either, and it wouldn't address the fundamental issues the audit would uncover. I appreciate the loyalty, I told her, but we need to take a different approach. This isn't just about surviving an audit. It's about making sure this never happens again. What do you have in mind? I smiled slightly. I'm still working on the details, but when I'm ready, I'll need everyone on board. You've got us, she assured me. Whatever it takes. As the day ended, I reviewed what I'd learned. The audit scope, Preston's new position, his uncle's influence. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, revealing a picture more complex than I'd initially imagined. This wasn't just about one department or one training program. It was about a system that allowed connections to override competence, that valued appearance over results. And systems, I reminded myself, can be changed if you understand how they work. I stayed late again, researching company policies, reviewing the employee handbook, examining the corporate structure. Somewhere in this tangle of procedures and hierarchies was the answer I needed. Around midnight, I found it, a clause in the company charter regarding intellectual property developed by employees. I read it 3 times to be sure I understood the implications. Then I began to write, not just a training program this time, but something much more significant. By the time I left the office, the first pieces of my plan were in place. Not just a defense against the audit, but something that would reshape the entire company's approach to training and development. Preston had threatened that this wasn't over. He was right, but not in the way he imagined. It was just beginning. The audit team arrived Monday morning, 5 stern-faced professionals in matching charcoal suits. Their leader, Veronica, introduced herself with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. We'll need a dedicated workspace, she informed me, and immediate access to all training materials, employee records, and performance data for the past 18 months. I showed them to the conference room we'd prepared. Everything you've requested is ready for review. My team is available for any questions. Veronica raised an eyebrow. That was efficient. We believe in transparency, I said pleasantly. The sooner you complete your audit, the sooner we can all focus on improving customer service. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Indeed. As they settled in, Dean appeared at my elbow. They're already requesting individual interviews with staff, starting with the new hires. Should we be concerned? Not at all, I assured him. Everyone should speak honestly about their experiences. Even about the past month? He whispered. Especially about that, I smiled. Truth is our greatest ally right now. By midday, the audit team had established a rhythm. 2 members reviewing documents, 2 conducting interviews, and Veronica overseeing it all, occasionally making phone calls from a private office. Tasha caught me in the break room. They just spent an hour grilling Marco about why he came back after resigning, asked if he was promised special treatment. What did he say? That he left because of inadequate training and returned when he heard you were in charge. She grinned, said he'd document it in writing if they wanted. I nodded, satisfied. Perfect. They're digging for dirt, Iris, but they seem frustrated by what they're finding. Good. Keep me posted. On Wednesday, Veronica requested a meeting. She arrived in my office carrying a thick folder, her expression unreadable. Miss Meadows, we've identified several concerning patterns. She placed the folder on my desk. Most notably, an inconsistency in training methodologies. I opened the folder to find printouts of my original training materials alongside Preston's slideshows. Different approaches, certainly. The results speak for themselves. That's precisely the issue. Your methods produce significantly better outcomes despite directly contradicting approved corporate protocols. She tapped Preston's materials. These follow the standardized training manual, yours do not. Corporate protocols should serve the company's goals, not the other way around, I replied calmly. When they fail to produce results, they should be reevaluated. That's not your decision to make, she countered. Standardization exists for a reason. And what reason would that be? I asked. Because from where I sit, standardization, in this case, led to 12 resignations and a customer satisfaction score that dropped 40% in a month. Her mouth tightened. We're also concerned about the speed of your promotion. Director Vance appears to have bypassed several normal procedures, perhaps because the situation was deteriorating rapidly and required immediate intervention. Veronica made a note. One last item. Several employees have mentioned unauthorized training materials you created and distributed. These were never submitted for corporate approval. Here it was, the trap I'd been expecting. I kept my expression neutral. May I see the company charter? Section 27? Surprised by the request, she paused before pulling up the document on her tablet and sliding it across to me. I scrolled to the relevant section and began reading aloud. Intellectual property created by employees during non-working hours, using personal resources, remains the property of said employee unless specifically commissioned by the company. I looked up. My training materials were developed primarily after hours, on my own time, using my personal laptop. I have time-stamped drafts to verify this. That's irrelevant, Veronica argued. You distributed them during work hours for work purposes. I shared my personal intellectual property with colleagues. I corrected. Section 27.3 specifically permits employees to share their own intellectual property with coworkers without corporate approval, provided it does not violate confidentiality agreements or compromise proprietary systems. Veronica stared at me, clearly not expecting this response. Mr. Hayes will want to review this interpretation. I'm sure he will, I agreed, as will our legal team, who provided me with written confirmation yesterday. I pulled out an email from corporate legal, dated the previous day, outlining exactly the position I'd just stated. She took the paper, eyes scanning it rapidly. You consulted legal before our audit was complete? I wanted to ensure I understood my rights and responsibilities correctly, I said innocently. Transparency, remember? Veronica left visibly unsettled. As soon as my door closed, Tasha slipped in through the side entrance. That looked intense, she observed. They found what they were looking for, I explained. Just not in the way they expected. The IP angle worked? I nodded. Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. Thursday morning, I received an email from Richard Hayes himself, requesting a video conference at 2 p.m. I forwarded it to Eleanor, who responded immediately. I'll join you. Don't engage alone. When the call connected, Hayes appeared on screen, a silver-haired man with Preston's same tight smile. Eleanor sat beside me, her presence, a silent statement of support. Miss Meadows, Director Vance, Hayes greeted us with professional coolness. I understand our audit has uncovered some interesting findings. If by interesting you mean evidence that your nephew's training approach caused significant damage to one of our best-performing departments, then yes, Eleanor replied before I could speak. Hayes's smile tightened further. The audit is ongoing. I wouldn't draw conclusions prematurely. With respect, Mr. Hayes, I interjected. The data is unambiguous. Customer satisfaction dropped 42%. Call resolution times doubled. 12 employees resigned in 4 weeks. Those aren't conclusions. They're facts. Facts can be interpreted in many ways, he countered. A transitional period often shows temporary declines before improvement. There was no sign of upcoming improvement, Eleanor stated flatly. Quite the opposite. Hayes shifted his attention to me. Miss Meadows, I understand you've made claims regarding intellectual property rights to certain training materials. Not claims, Mr. Hayes. Facts, supported by company policy and legal confirmation. Indeed, he steepled his fingers. It puts us in an interesting position. If these materials are truly your personal property, then the company has no right to use them without proper compensation or licensing. I felt a chill. This was the counterattack I hadn't anticipated, using my own argument against me. Are you suggesting, Eleanor asked slowly, that you would rather lose access to training materials that demonstrably work than acknowledge Miss Meadows' contribution? I'm merely following the logical conclusion of her position, Hayes replied smoothly. If we accept her ownership claim, we must either license the materials or cease using them entirely. Corporate consistency demands it. The trap was elegant. Either I surrendered my claim to the materials, allowing them to be controlled by Hayes and potentially shelved, or I maintained ownership and watched them be removed from use altogether, harming the department I was trying to save. There is a third option, I said carefully. Both turned to look at me. Section 31 of the company charter allows for intellectual property licensing with revenue sharing based on performance metrics. I pulled up the document on my tablet. I'm prepared to license my training materials to the company under specific conditions. Hayes frowned. What conditions? Implementation across all regional centers, quarterly performance reviews, and if metrics improve as projected, a percentage of the cost savings as licensing fees. That's unprecedented, Hayes objected. So is losing 12 employees in a month due to inadequate training, I countered. Unprecedented problems require unprecedented solutions. Eleanor was watching me with newfound respect. Hayes seemed to be calculating his options. I've already drafted the proposal, I continued, sending the document to both of them. As you'll see, it includes provisions for ongoing development and adaptation of the materials. The company benefits from improved performance, and I'm compensated fairly for my work. This would need board approval, Hayes said, but I could see his resistance weakening. The board meets next week, Eleanor pointed out. I'm happy to present it. Hayes studied me through the screen. You've thought this through quite thoroughly, Miss Meadows. I've had a month to watch everything I built fall apart, I replied evenly. It provided ample motivation. After Hayes disconnected, Eleanor turned to me with a questioning look. How long have you been planning this? Since I found the IP clause in the charter, I admitted, but the licensing idea came to me during the audit, when I realized they might try to use my ownership claim against me. It's brilliant, she acknowledged. If the board approves, you've not only protected your work, but ensured its implementation company-wide, and made it virtually impossible for someone like Preston to dismantle it again, I added. The financial incentives alone will keep it in place. Speaking of Preston, Eleanor said carefully, he's requested a transfer back to this region. I felt a cold spike of alarm. Under whose authority? His uncle's, naturally. But after this, she gestured to my proposal. I think that request may be quietly withdrawn. Friday morning, the audit team departed, with significantly less confidence than they'd arrived with. Veronica handed me their preliminary findings, a document notable for its careful wording and lack of concrete recommendations. The final report will be submitted next week, she said stiffly. I look forward to reading it, I replied, knowing it would likely be rewritten several times before reaching any meaningful audience. As they left, Dean appeared in my doorway. Is it over? Not quite. I handed him a folder. I need you to implement this immediately. He opened it to find a revised training schedule, one that integrated my original methods with new elements developed over the past week. This is for the entire department, not just new hires. Everyone needs a refresh, I explained, including the trainers themselves. And the supervisors? He asked tentatively. Especially the supervisors. I gave him a pointed look. Starting with you. To his credit, Dean nodded without argument. When do we begin? Monday. And Dean? I waited until he met my eyes. This is your chance to be part of the solution. Don't waste it. The following Wednesday, Eleanor called with the news. The board had approved my licensing proposal with minor modifications. My training materials would be implemented across all regional centers, with quarterly reviews and performance-based compensation. There's more, she added. Richard Hayes has announced his early retirement, effective next month. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the implications. And Preston? Transferred to the Western region, far from his uncle's influence. He'll be starting over with no special treatment. That evening, I stayed late again, but not to work. I walked the floor of the call center, now quiet, after hours. 6 months ago, I'd been a trainer with no official authority, building something I believed in despite limited support. Now I stood as a director with a company-wide mandate and the means to ensure my work would continue regardless of office politics or personal connections. As I passed Dean's desk, I noticed a small frame he'd recently added, the customer satisfaction score chart from the past week, showing the first upward trend since Preston's arrival. A reminder of failure transformed into evidence of recovery. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You won this round. Doesn't mean the game is over. Preston's final attempt to unsettle me. I deleted it without responding. He still didn't understand. This had never been a game to me. It was about building something that worked, something that helped people succeed. The fact that it had also brought down those who tried to destroy it, that was just justice finding its own path. 2 months later, I stood before a room of trainers from all regional centers, conducting the first unified training certification program. Faces both familiar and new looked back at me, eager to learn the methods that had transformed our department's performance. The system we're implementing today isn't just about scripts or procedures, I told them. It's about honesty, showing new hires the real challenges they'll face while giving them the tools to overcome them. It's about building confidence through competence. From the back of the room, Eleanor nodded approvingly. Beside her sat 2 board members who had specifically requested to observe the program that was already showing promising results across the company. Most importantly, I continued, it's about listening to the people doing the actual work. The best solutions rarely come from the top down. They emerge from those who face the problems every day. As I guided them through the first module, I thought about how far we'd come. The department was now fully staffed, with a waiting list of applicants. Customer satisfaction scores had returned to their previous highs. Dean had found his place as a floor supervisor, his management ambitions replaced by a genuine desire to support his team. And Preston? According to company gossip, he was struggling in his new position, no longer protected by his uncle's influence. Without special treatment, his lack of practical experience was finally catching up to him. I didn't take pleasure in his difficulties. That wasn't the point of all this. The victory wasn't seeing him fail. It was building something he couldn't tear down, creating a system that valued results over relationships, substance over style. The last session of the day ended with enthusiastic applause. As trainers filed out, many stopped to share stories from their own centers, eager to implement what they'd learned. Eleanor approached as the room emptied. The board is impressed, she said quietly. There's talk of expanding your role to include all customer-facing training, not just call centers. One step at a time, I smiled. Let's make sure this works first. It's already working, she pointed out. The numbers speak for themselves. Yes, I thought. They certainly did. Numbers had started this journey. The stark decline after Preston took over. The 12 resignations that couldn't be explained away. And numbers had completed it. The licensing agreement that ensured my methods would continue regardless of who held what title. The improved metrics that validated what I'd known all along. The ultimate revenge wasn't getting Preston fired or seeing his uncle retire in disgrace. It was creating something so demonstrably effective that the company had no choice but to embrace it, protect it, and spread it throughout the organization. I'd turned a personal setback into institutional change, transformed individual vindication into collective improvement, and that was worth more than any momentary satisfaction of watching someone who wronged me suffer. It was lasting, meaningful, real. As I packed up my materials, I glanced at the customer satisfaction board now prominently displayed in every department, a constant reminder that results matter more than politics. That competence eventually overcomes connection. The system that had once pushed me aside now ensured my vision would continue long after any individual's career. That was true victory, not defeating a person, but changing a culture. If you've ever been sidelined despite doing excellent work, I hope this story resonates with you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back immediately. It's playing the long game, documenting your value, and letting results speak for themselves. Have you ever been in a situation where your contributions were dismissed or minimized? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story helped give you some perspective, please like and subscribe for more real-life workplace stories. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by the impact your work has on those around you.